Shalom, shalom to everyone watching. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero with the Ways of Israel. We are now in chapter 21, Death and Mourning, or Death and Burial. And we're looking at, in this morning's series, to be a Jew, mourning periods. So Jewish law provides for 3 successive periods of mourning following the burial, each observed with increasingly less intensity. The first period is known as Shiva, which means 7, or refers to 7-day period of mourning following the burial. As soon as the body is interred, the actual mourning period begins. Shiva is observed for the following relationships or relations: father, for mother, for wife or husband, son, daughter, brother, or sister. It is most proper for a family to observe the Shiva together in the home where the deceased lived. However, it's not mandatory, and members of a family may observe Shiva at any other convenient place, even separately, in their respective home, if the circumstances require it. Now, practices observed during Shiva. Mourners do not sit on seats of normal height, but on a low stool or footstool or hassock may serve for the same purpose. Some follow the practice of removing the cushions from the couches or armchairs and sitting on the lower frame, and this is permissible. Sephardic families follow the most ancient practice on sitting on the floor, and from this practice derives the expression of sitting, Shiva, although it's not necessary that the mourners actually sit all the time. Mourners do not wear shoes made of leather, or slipper, canvas, or rubber shoes may be worn as an alternative to stocking feet. Male mourners refrain during this period of time from shaving and hair cutting, and females avoid the use of cosmetic during these 7 days of mourning. Mourners may not go to work, and the local rabbi should be consulted for exceptions, as there may be extenuating circumstances in each individual cases. Avoidance of pleasure. One does not bath or shower for comfort, although it is permissible to wash for cleanliness unless it's a matter of severe discomfort. One may not engage in sexual relations or intimacy, nor promiscuity. One may not be put on new or freshly laundered clothing. One may not engage in Torah study because it brings joy, except for the books that has to deal with laws of mourning, or books that is of the nature of lamenting, like Job, Lamentation, and parts of Jeremiah, which speaks of grief and anguish. Shiva period is concluded on the morning of the 7th day following the morning services. The day of the burial is counted as day 1 of the Shiva. Should the 7th day be the Sabbath, the public aspect of Shiva are concluded just prior to Shabbat, allowing only for the time necessary to prepare for the Shabbat. The widespread notion of Shiva concludes at noon on Friday or festival eve has no basis in Jewish law. Should Shabbat come in the midst of Shiva period, the mourning practices associated with Shiva are suspended for the Shabbat, but resumes after Shabbat. Shabbat is nevertheless counted in the reckoning of the 7 days. Should one of the biblical festivals interrupt Shiva, the remainder of the Shiva is completely terminated and it is not resumed after the festival. Should a funeral take place during the week of Passover or Sukkot, Shiva is observed, but it does not begin until after the entire festival is concluded. In the diaspora, the last day of the festival is counted as the first day of Shiva. Purim and Hanukkah are not among the holidays which terminate the mourning, although the mourner is permitted to attend the synagogue for the Megillah reading on Purim. If there is a delay in learning of a death because of one has been away or lives in a distant city, the mourner begins to observe all the mourning practice of Shiva from the time he receives the news. If the rest of the family is still in the midst of Shiva period in the city where the death or burial occurred, he may join them and rise from Shiva at the same time as they do. If one cannot join the rest of the mourners, or of the week of Shiva has already passed, the day on which the news is received is counted as the first day of Shiva. If the news of the death is received 30 days have passed since the day of death, Shiva is not observed. One need only to remove one's shoe and sit on the low seat for an hour, indicating a token of observance. The mourner's benedictions of blessed is the true judge is said. Where the deceased is apparent, the garment is also rendered. The second period known is called Shloshim, which literally means 30 days or 30. And it refers to the period of time from the end of Shiva to the 30th day after burial. Attending parties, even where there's no music, is to be played, or getting married is forbidden during this period of time, and so is shaving or cutting one's hair for the entire month. And this concludes the mourning for the relatives other than mother or father. The period of Shloshim is concluded on the morning of the 30th day. The day of burial is counted as the first day. Should one have a major festival that occurs during Shloshim or Shloshim period, mourning is treated as having been concluded. Its special restrictions are not resumed till after the festival. The third period observed for a mother or father is known as simply Avelut, mourning. It terminates at the end of the 12th month from the day of the death of the loved one, and it's extended from the end of Shloshim through the first anniversary of the day of the death. During this period, joyous events and dinners and music and theaters and concerts should be avoided. Kaddish is said daily by the sun for 11 months of the year. In the event there is no one to say Kaddish, normally someone is paid to be able to say Kaddish for the mourner. And that person saying Kaddish is really doing a mitzvah for one who does not have someone to say Kaddish for him or for one of the loved ones. After the year, it is forbidden to continue the practice or restraints that openly indicates continuation of grief. So the total period of grief is normally for 1 year. Now, what do we do regarding comforting the mourner? The requirement to comfort the mourner does not begin until after the burial. Until the time of the bereaved should be allowed to give his full expression to his grief. Don't hold back. It's a time of pain and sorrow. No formal condolences should be extended during this period of time. The practice followed in some communities of encouraging condolences visits to the mourning family prior to the burial, whether at the residence or at the funeral home, is not in keeping with the Jewish custom and procedures. Only the closest family or friends whose assistance is required in making arrangements for the funeral or other matters should visit with the family of the deceased before the funeral. Following the burial, the mourner's very first meal may not consist of their own food. It should be prepared for them by neighbors, friends, and relatives. Obviously kosher. The practice is based on the passage of Ezekiel chapter 24, verse 17, which speaks negatively of the then prevailing mourning practice and says, "Eat not the bread of men." It is therefore regarded as a mitzvah, a commandment for neighbors or friends of the mourner to provide the first meal for them. This meal is called the meal of comfort. The meal that's customarily contained hard-boiled egg, a food that has become a symbol of mourning and condolences. The egg's roundness in a way symbolizes the continuous nature of life and perhaps also suggests that from despair there may follow the renewal of joy. Although there is no special restrictions concerning the meal, care should be taken that it's not given a party-like atmosphere of celebration. It should be eaten quietly and in contemplation by mourners. The meal is not intended for the visitors. For those of you who say, hey, there's going to be a party, it's not a party. It's for the purpose of comforting the mourners. The meal of comfort is not served if the mourners return from the funeral in the late afternoon preceding a Shabbat or festival day. It is served on the intermediate days of Passover and Sukkot or Chol HaMoed, even though there is no Shiva. Now, upon entering the house of mourning, one does not extend greetings, since the words cannot adequately express the depth of sympathy a comforter wishes to convey, and that what is said is often shallow and it is best to say nothing. Tradition dictates that the visitor does not open the conversation with the mourner, but allows the later to do so. It's proper to turn the conversation to the deceased, to reminisce and to mention the good qualities which endeared him to others. Don't pull out all the negatives. It's not the proper time. Those who purposely steer clear of mentioning the deceased, believing that in this way they take the mind of the mourner off his grief, do not fully understand the psychology of the grief. To spend visit talking about the trivialities is far less comforting and far more painful to the mourner than can be imagined. It's better to talk about the deceased. Upon taking leave of the mourner in a house of mourning any time during the week of Shiva, the 7 days, the traditional formula of sympathy is said in the following way. Hamakom hanahaim etchem betok sha'ar avela Sion veYerushalayim. May the Lord comfort you with all of the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. Although there is no need to say more than this prayer, additional words of comfort or hope may be said, and if the comfort feels inclined to do so and can find the proper words to do so. Well, this is a pause, and we will continue this chapter of death and burial, or death and mourning, as we take a look at special rules that applies to Cohens. And that we'll see it in the next video. Shalom, shalom.